Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum dear students. In today's session again we would continue the novel Tess of the D'Urberville. In this session we would do the third phase of the novel, that is the rally. And chapters 16 to 24 would be covered in this session. Before I move forward with today's session, I would just like to share a quick review of the previous session. As far as previous session is concerned, in that we started phase 2. Since phase 2 consists only of a few chapters, so we covered chapters 12 to 15 and thus finished phase 2 in the previous session. In doing so, we covered the following aspects. We explored the text of these chapters. We also explored the related themes as they were embedded in the text of these chapters. For you, I also discussed the development of characters, especially the development in the character of Tess after going through the whole experience, and as a consequence of what happened to her, we discussed all that. We also critically analyzed the selected parts of the text to understand how, what and why Tess felt and how a change came in her. With this we move on to today's session. As far as today's session is concerned, as I have already said, we would start phase 3, the rally in this phase, and we will cover chapters 16 to 24. Thus we would finish this phase inshallah in today's session. Well, this is the opening text of chapter 16, that of course is the opening text of phase 3 as well. As I would go through the text, you can notice that I have highlighted some parts in blue color, so we would be discussing important points related to this. The text opens as follows. On a thyme-scented bird-hatching morning in May, between 2 and 3 years after the return from Trantridge, silent, reconstructive years for Tess Durbeyfield, she left her home for the second time. Well, what we notice about the plot and structure of the novel at the very outset is that Hardy again has shown some lapse of time. 2 to 3 years time has passed since her first journey from home to Alex's farmhouse, when the purpose was to support the family, and this journey to Trantridge, then coming back from there, was a great learning experience, though a very tragic experience for Tess. After that, now this 2 to 3 years time has lapsed, her son Sorrow has died. This has been a time of what Hardy says, silent reconstructive time. These silent reconstructive years of her life, they have helped her mature, they have helped her learn through thinking about, through brooding over what she has been through. And once again she leaves her home for the second time. Having packed up her luggage so that it could be sent to her later, she started in a hired trap for the little town of Stowcastle, through which it was necessary to pass on her journey, now in a direction almost opposite to that of her first adventuring. Well, Hardy's, I would say, very masterful handling of language choice is very, very prominent here. The choice of words, her movement towards a direction almost opposite to that of her first adventuring, shows and indicates on a symbolic level that this journey, this experience is going to be an experience hopefully opposite to the first one. Anyhow, on the curve of the nearest hill, she looked back regretfully at Marlott and her father's house, although she had been so anxious to get away. So Tess is caught up between two kind of feelings. She was anxious, she wanted to leave this place, she didn't have good experiences here, she wanted to start afresh, and this is what she is on her way for. But as she moves on the curve of the nearest hill, she looked back regretfully at Marlott and her father's house. It is a mixed feeling of pain that is attached with her hometown, with her home place, and with her father's house. Regretfully, she looks back at somewhere inward, somewhere in her heart, she doesn't want to leave this place. Her kindred dwelling there would probably continue their daily lives as heretofore, with no great diminution of pleasure in their consciousness, although she would be far off and they deprived of her smile. In a few days, the children would engage in their games as merrily as ever, without the sense of any gap left by her departure. Well, this is the real bitterness of life, that no matter whosoever leaves, life keeps on going on. The realization that the life of her siblings, of her parents, and of people around in the village would keep on going on as happily in the same way without noticing her presence, this makes her feel sad. This leaving of the younger children she had decided to be for the best. Were she to remain, they would probably gain less good by her precepts than harm by her example. Again, she feels guilty that she has brought a bad example. Not only she has brought a bad name to the family, but she is a bad example for her younger siblings. So out of her sense of guilt and out of her sense of responsibility towards her family, she thinks it is better for them that she leaves them, because her presence would not be of much good for them. It would rather bring harm to them. She went through Stour Castle without pausing and onward to a junction of highways where she could await a carrier's van that ran to the southwest. For the railways which engirdled this interior tract of country had never yet stuck across it. While waiting, however, there came along a farmer in his spring cart, driving approximately in the direction that she wished to pursue. Though he was a stranger to her, she accepted his offer of a seat beside him, ignoring that its motive was a mere tribute to her countenance. अब उस बंदे ने क्यों उसको बिठाया था? Because she's a beautiful woman after all. But she ignores this part of it. This shows her maturity. This shows her how to handle the worldly life. He was going to Weatherbury, and by accompanying him thither, that is there, this is Old English, she could walk the remainder of the distance instead of travelling in the van by way of Casterbridge. So she changed her route slightly and took the lift as it was offered by this man, because it would save her from, taking the trouble of taking the van, because where he would leave her, from there she could walk a small distance to cover the leftover the distance. Well, when we look at chapter 16, we realize that Tess leaves home for the second time, deciding that if she would remain there, her younger siblings would probably gain less good by her precepts than harm by her example. In good spirits, she sets out to begin work at Talbot's Dairy, located in the valley of the Great Dairies. On her way, the new scenery makes her feel good. Change in the surrounding brings a change to her mood as well. The beautiful day and the beautiful landscape puts her in an optimistic mood. Enchanting by the surrounding beauty, she travels through the mists of Blackmoor or Blakemore. She passes the burial ground of her ancient ancestors, but decides to keep going, dismissing ideas about her ancestors, realizing that she has as much of a mother and as a father in her. Tess arrives at the dairy around milking time, 1:30 in the morning. So she has reached her new destination by the end of this chapter. And again, what becomes symbolic about this chapter is a lot. I would say that Hardy's use of symbols is remarkable. What he has used as symbols is ancestors, the journey itself, and the early morning. Let's see one by one how. The first symbol that Hardy has used here is of ancestors. As she is travelling, upon leaving Marlott, once Tess again confronts the ancestors whose discovery by her father prompted Tess to be sent on her first journey that ended up with a ruin, we notice that this time is a different time. While she was once intrigued by the idea that she may find fortune and security with the d'Urbervilles, we notice that this time that is a quite different time point in her life. She has rejected such unrealistic dreams. She is more mature and she is more realistic. She decides not to stop there and continue the journey. This on symbolic level shows that she would not be much bothered and much concerned and much interested in her identity as d'Urberville, and she would like to continue on with her life without that. The second important symbol is that of journey, and her journey to the dairy represents her desire to perform her hard manual labor that we'd see her doing there. This journey is also different from the previous journey in the sense that the first journey started with confusion and hesitation. If you remember, she didn't want to go there, but she was forced out of circumstances to go there. This journey shows more calmness and more confidence. This journey shows her, you see, firm belief that she wants to take a new start in life. The third symbol that I would like to talk about is the symbol of early morning. As Tess arrives at the dairy around milking time, 4:30 in the morning, this early morning arrival is symbolic of the beginning of a new day in the life of Tess. Well, dear students, here is some more text from the novel that is about Tess. Her face had lately changed with changing states of mind, continually fluctuating between beauty and ordinariness, according as the thoughts were gay or grave. One day she was pink and flawless, another pale and tragical. When she was pink, she was feeling less than when pale. Her more perfect beauty accorded with her less elevated mood, her more intense mood with her less perfect beauty. The portrait as of Tess is presented to us by Hardy. He says that some days she would be happy, some days she would be sad. Some days, as per you see her mood, in accordance with her happy mood, her face would be pink and flawless and she would be cheerful. The other days when she would have grim thoughts, grave thoughts, she would be pale and she would have a tragic countenance. But it is important that what Hardy points out is that it is this grave, tragic mood that adds beauty to her appearance, and unlike how it is generally that people look more beautiful when they are quite happy and cheerful, she looks more beautiful when she is in that sad mood. So it was her best face physically that was now set against the south wind. So now that she would have that sad face, it would be the best face, Hardy says, she would have. The irresistible, universal, automatical tendency to find sweet pleasure somewhere, which pervades all life, from the meanest to the highest, had at length mastered Tess. Again, Hardy presents his philosophy of life, that no matter what happens to somebody, it is the natural, irresistible, general, universal, automatic desire to find some pleasure in life that every human being, and actually all the creatures from the meanest to the highest, from the lowest of the creatures to the human beings, everybody has that desire to find some good, to find some pleasure, which keeps on making us go. So this has mastered Tess now as well. Being even now only a young woman of 20, one who mentally and sentimentally had not finished growing, it was impossible that any event should have left upon her an impression that was not in time capable of transmutation. So being very young, she has overcome that part or phase of her life that she faced in phase 1 and 2 as presented in the novel, and now again she is moving on with life. With reference to this chapter, what we need to notice is theme of change as inevitable. This is what Hardy has presented as one of major themes. We can notice change in Tess, we can notice her desire for change, and we can notice Hardy's philosophy of change that is applicable to Tess as well as to all the creatures and to all the human beings. This leads us to chapter 17 of this phase. Tess finally arrives at the Talbot's dairy. This dairy is completely different in terms of landscape, in terms of geographical presentation and overall environment from her previous experience at the first dairy where she worked. Richard Crick, the master dairyman, treats her kindly and offers to let her rest, but she prefers to begin work immediately. This again relates to her desire for manual work and supports that theme. Thus, Tess begins milking with the others. She quickly fits in and feels very much at home. Crick knows a little about the D'Urbervilles, but Tess is not interested in the idea that she comes from an esteemed family. Later, while Tess is on a break with the other workers, Crick tells a story about an aged man named William Dewey who was chased by a bull but played a Christmas Eve hymn for the bull on his fiddle, caused it to lay down as if it were in a nativity scene. After Crick tells the story, young man remarks that the story is a reminder of the medieval times when faith was a living thing. Again, Hardy's reference to this faith as a living thing in medieval times shows his criticism on the changing times where faith is no more of that importance as it used to be. Anyhow, one of the men at the dairy looks familiar to her and she recognizes him as the highbrow man whom she noticed back at the May Day village dance in Mallet. So in terms of plot, there is some more advancement that takes place in this chapter. One of the major characters of the novel, Angel, who was introduced actually in phase 1, just a glimpse of Angel was presented there where he would just appear temporarily to dance with the young girls on a May Day spring activity where Tess also was a part of that, and without talking to Tess he left. Now once again we see him on the scene. This man, we are told about him here is that his name is Angel Clare, and actually in the evening Tess overhears the dairymaids talking about him and she discovers his name as Angel Clare. And she also comes to know that he is the son of a clergyman. As Tess inquires about Angel, another milkmaid tells her that Angel is learning milking and never says much. He doesn't talk much to people. This chapter provides us some information about Angel. We are told that Angel's two brothers have also joined the church as clergymen, whereas his father is also a clergyman. But Angel himself prefers a life in agriculture, and thus he has become what he is here. And he has come actually to this dairy to learn about its work because he wants to do some work in the field of agriculture as his profession. Tess notices that there is much talk about Angel among the other dairymaids and many of them seem to have a crush on him. Well, when it comes to important discussion points with reference to this chapter, I would say that this chapter mainly introduces the character of Angel. In contrast to Alec d'Urberville, we see the character of Angel as it is presented by Hardy. There was an immediate sense of danger that was related to the character of Alec from the very first meeting with Tess. However, when it comes to Angel, as far as Angel is concerned, he is presented by Hardy with a significant sense of idealism and purity attached to his personality. At the outset, we notice that a milkmaid tells Tess that he talks very less. One of the milkmaids even thinks that he does not even think of girls. We are also told that he is the son of a clergyman. We come to know that his other siblings, his other two brothers, they have become clergymen. Also, his reaction to Dairyman Crick's story suggests that he is a person with deep moral convictions. It is also important to notice that an Angel is an outsider in the scene, that he is the only one in his family who did not enter clergy, rather decided to enter into agriculture. As an outsider in some sense, Angel Clare thus has some resemblance to the outcast Tess, who also is a stranger and outsider to this situation. The question arises for the reader, Is it the work of fate again that two people who are strangers and two people who are outsiders to the community right now they are in, they come together there? Is it the role of fate or something else? With this we move to chapter 18, and here is the opening text of chapter 18 that provides us some more insight into the character of Angel. Angel Clare rises out of the past not altogether as a distinct figure but as an appreciative voice, a long regard of fixed, abstracted eyes and a mobility of mouth somewhat too small and delicately lined for a man's, though with an unexpectedly firm close of the lower lip now and then enough to do away with any inference of indecision. So again you can see that Hardy is pen picturing, he is sketching the whole portrait of Angel for the reader. Nevertheless, something nebulous, preoccupied, vague in his bearing and regard marked him as one who probably had no very definite aim or concern about his material future. Yet as a lad, people had said of him that he was one who might do anything if he tried. He was youngest of his son of his father, a poor parson at the other end of the country, and had arrived at Talbot's Dairy as a 6 months pupil. After going the round of some other farms, his object being to acquire a practical skill in the various processes of farming with a view either to the colonies or the tenure for a home of a home farm as circumstances might decide. His entry into the ranks of the agriculturists and breeders was a step in the young man's career which had been anticipated neither by himself nor by others. Mr. Clare, the elder, whose first wife had died and left him a daughter, married a second late in life. This lady had somewhat unexpectedly brought him 3 sons, so that between Angel, the youngest, and his father, the vicar, there seemed to be almost a missing generation. तो अब बाप उसका काफ़ी बूढ़ा हो गया है because Angel and the other 2 brothers, they are the sons of the second wife of Mr. Clare's, the father. Of these boys, the aforesaid Angel, the child of his old age, was the only son who had not taken a university degree. Though he was a single one of them whose early promise might have done full justice to an academical training. So what we come to know about him is, interestingly, that he has not taken university degree, whereas his other 2 brothers have done that. Some 2 or 3 years before Angel's appearance at the Mallet dance, on a day when he had left school and was pursuing his studies at home, a parcel came to the vicarage from the local booksellers directed to the Reverend James Clare, that is the father. The vicar, having opened it and found it to contain a book, read a few pages, whereupon he jumped up from his seat and went straight to the shop with the book under his arm. "Why has this been sent to my house?" he asked peremptorily, holding up the volume. "It was ordered, sir." "Not by me or anyone belonging to me, I am happy to say." The shopkeeper looked into his order book. "Oh, it has been misdirected, sir," he said. "It was ordered by Mr. Angel Clare and should have been sent to him." Mr. Clare winced as if he had been struck. He went home pale and dejected and called Angel into his study. "Look into this book, my boy," he said. "What do you know about it?" "I ordered it," said Angel simply. "What for?" "To read." "How can you think of reading it?" "How can I? Why, it is a system of philosophy. There is no more moral or even religious work published." "Yes, moral enough, I don't deny that, but religious? And for you, who intend to be a minister of the gospel." "Since you have alluded to the matter, father," said the son, with anxious thought upon his face, "I should like to say once for all that I should prefer not to take orders." So he tells his father directly that he doesn't want to be a clergyman. "I fear I could not conscientiously do so. I love the church as one loves a parent. I shall always have the warmest affection for her. There is no institution for whose history I have a deeper admiration, but I cannot honestly be ordained her minister as my brothers are, while she refuses to liberate her mind from an untenable redemptive theolatry. So he criticizes the practices of church, and he says that in that case he is not ready to be a clergyman. Here is some more text that gives us insights into Angel's life and Hardy's philosophy. Early association with country's solitudes had bred in him an unconquerable and almost unreasonable aversion to modern life of towns, and shut him out from such success as he might have aspired to by following a mundane calling in the impracticability of the spiritual one. But something had to be done. He had wasted many valuable years, and having an acquaintance who was starting on a thriving life as a colonial farmer, it occurred to Angel that this might be a lead in the right direction. Farming either in the colonies, America, or at home. Farming at any rate. After becoming well qualified for the business by a careful apprenticeship, that was a vocation which would probably afford an independence without the sacrifice of what he valued even more than a competency, that is, intellectual liberty. So this is the background how you see, challenging the orthodox religion and its values and systems, he decided to join farming. Anyhow, the text continues. So we find Angel Clare at 6 and 20 here at Talbothays as a student of Kine, and as there were no houses near at hand in which he could get a comfortable lodging, a boarder at the dairy's man. So the reason or the logic is being created why he is there, and we are told he's a young man of 26. His room was an immense attic which ran the whole length of the dairy house. It could only be reached by a ladder from the cheese loft, and had been closed up for a long time till he arrived and selected it as his retreat. Here Clare had plenty of space, and could often be heard by the dairy folk pacing up and down when the household had gone to rest. A portion was divided off at one end by a curtain, behind which was his bed, the outer part being furnished as a homely sitting room. After first he lived up above entirely, reading a good deal and strumming upon an old harp which he had bought at a sale, saying when in a bitter humour that he might have to get his living by it in the streets some day. But he soon preferred to read human nature by taking his meals downstairs in the general dining kitchen with the dairyman and his wife and the maids and men, who all together formed a lively assembly, for though but few milking hands slept in the house, several joined the family at meals. So what we come to know about Angel Clare's is that so soon he got adjusted there, and though initially he used to stay most of the times in his room reading books, then he started getting mixed with the milkmaids there and the family of the dairyman, and he would spend more time with them studying human nature. The longer Clare resided here, the less objection had he to his company, and the more did he like to share quarters with them in common. So gradually, he who belongs to a different class of society, he who has been brought up in a different setup, now he is getting used to this lifestyle, and he's getting used to feel comfortable in the company of these people. Much to his surprise, he took indeed a real delight in their companionship. The conventional farm folk of his imagination, personified in the newspaper press by the pitiable dummy known as Hodge, were obliterated after a few days' residence. At close quarters, no Hedge was to be seen. At first, it is true, when Clare's intelligence was fresh from a contrasting society, these friends with whom he now hobnobbed seemed a little strange. Sitting down as a level member of the dairyman's household seemed at the outset an undignified proceeding. The ideas, the modes, the surroundings appeared retrogressive and unmeaning. But with living on there day after day, the acute sojourner became conscious of a new aspect in the spectacle. So we see not only he starts getting used to their lifestyle, but also he starts admiring a lot of things in this lifestyle, and he feels quite comfortable in all these surroundings. So here is some text that further provides us insights into the character of Angel. As it has already been discussed that Angel refused to join church, and when he gave his argument that he couldn't do that, it was very difficult for his father to understand that. The text goes as follows. It had never occurred to the straightforward and simple-minded vicar that one of his own flesh and blood would come to this. He was stultified, shocked, paralyzed. And if Angel were not going to enter the church, what was the use of sending him to Cambridge? This is what his father thought. The university as a step to anything but ordination seemed, to this man of fixed ideas, a preface without a volume. He was a man not merely religious but devout, a firm believer, not as the phrase is now elusively construed by theological thimble riggers in the church and out of it, but in the old and ardent sense of the evangelical school, one who could indeed opine that the eternal and divine did. 18 centuries ago, Angel's father tried argument, persuasion, entreaty. He tried actually everything to persuade, to convince Angel, but he was not successful in doing so. So this was the reason of Angel joining farming there and coming to the place where now Tess was. Before we move forward, let's quickly look what else happens in chapter 18. We are told about Angel further that he spent his time in London trying to find a business profession. Gradually he has started despising the distinctions of rank and wealth as they are in the society, and now he has decided that he would like to live a life that is closer to nature. He believes it would enable him to preserve his intellectual liberty outside the stifling conditions of urban life. Now that he is 26 years old, he is there to learn firsthand about farming by visiting sites devoted to the subject, and there he has come to the farm to learn farming. Because of this background, he is treated as a superior by most of his workers at the dairy. By nature, he is gentlemanly and thoughtful. Initially, he stays aloof and is shy, but soon he befriends the other workers and maids and spends more time with them. Anyhow, he is attracted towards the beauty of Tess and believes that she seems uncommonly virginal and pure. On the other hand, Tess tries to ignore him and stay away from him out of shame for her secret past, because it becomes ironic that he thinks of her as a virgin and as a pure girl, and she takes her as an incarnation of purity, whereas what has happened to Tess, out of shame to hold that secret with her, she tries to avoid him. Well, here are some important discussion points with reference to this chapter. What we notice is that in this chapter there is a shift from Tess to Angel. Well, because Angel is one of the major male leads in the novel, he is the male protagonist of the novel, so Hardy devotes this full-fledged chapter to give us details about him, and for the first time we get some biographical information about Angel Clare. Some issues of morality are discussed, and what we notice is Hardy's belief in unconventional morality. Hardy gives greater indication that Angel Clare is a man with unconventional moral and religious values, in contrast to the narrow religious beliefs of his father. Angel is open to other moral belief systems, and it is this difference of opinion that leads Angel not to attend a college or university and to enter in clergy as his father expected. Rather, he decides to join farming. Well, as we go through the text of this chapter, we also notice a similarity between Angel and Tess. Not only that Angel has unconventional religious beliefs, but also he is unconventional with regard to his rejection of primary, social system of the primacy of ranks and social status. He resembles Tess in this. We also noticed previously Tess, who baptized her child herself, rejecting the conventional religious and social systems did all that. And now we notice Angel, who appears to be similar to Tess in that he also challenges the conventional religious beliefs. This brings us to chapter 19. And what we see in chapter 19 is that dairyman keeps on interchanging the cows to be milked by particular milkers because it leads to developing a fondness in cows for particular milkers, which sometimes creates problems. अब वो जो गायें थी वो used to हो जाती थी किसी भी एक particular आदमी या maid के लिए कि that person would milk them. So in order to avoid that, the dairyman would keep on changing or rotating the routine. However, the milkers themselves prefer to stay with particular cows. They find themselves comfortable working with them. After a few weeks, Tess discovers that Angel is breaking the dairy's rules by lining up her favorite cows for her. One day she tells him that she has noticed that. Later that night, Tess walks alone in the garden, listening to him strum his harp. Angel also notices her presence and comes down from his room to join her, which leads to a long and intimate conversation between the two. Angel wonders why a girl as young and as beautiful as Tess would have such a dark view of life. As they talked, he discovered that she had a very, very grim view of life, and he was surprised at that. On the other hand, Tess is interested in Angel's education and learning, and she also wonders why such a well-bred and well-schooled man would choose to become a farmer instead of joining his father and brothers in the clergy. Angel offers to teach Tess if she would like to, but she refuses. She tells Angel the answers she seeks are not to be found in books. Again, she becomes a mouthpiece of Hardy here, and it is his philosophy that she is talking about. Later, Tess comes to know that Angel has scorn for the descendants of many noble families, and she somehow feels happy that she did not talk about her own family history. This also shows that somehow she wants to have a good impression or a good image in the eyes of Angel. Well, here is some part of the text that I would like to share. This shows the kind of intimacy that was developing between the two. Knowing, however, the dairyman's wish, she endeavored conscientiously to take the animals just as they came, expecting the very hard yielders which she could not yet manage. But she soon found a curious correspondence between the ostensibly chance position of the cows and her wishes in this matter, till she felt that their order could not be the result of accident. The dairyman's pupil had lent a hand in getting the cows together of late, and at the 5th or 6th time she turned her eyes as she rested against the cow, full of sly inquiry upon him. "Mr. Clare, you have ranged the cows?" she said, blushing, and in making the accusation, symptoms of a smile gently lifted her upper lip in spite of her, so as to show the tips of her teeth, the lower lip remaining severely still. "Well, it makes no difference," said he. "You will always be here to milk them." "Do you think so? I hope I shall, but I don't know." She was angry with herself afterwards, thinking that he, unaware of her grave reasons for liking this seclusion, might have mistaken her meaning. She had spoken so earnestly to him, as if his presence were somehow a factor in her wish. Her misgiving was such that at dusk, when the milking was over, she walked in the garden alone to continue her regrets that she had disclosed to him her discovery of his considerateness. It was a typical summer evening in June, the atmosphere being in such delicate equilibrium and so transmissive that inanimate objects seemed endowed with 2 or 3 senses, if not 5. So in that context, there was no distinction between the near and the far, and an auditor felt close to everything within the horizon. The soundlessness impressed her as a positive entity rather than as the mere negation of noise. It was broken by the strumming of strings, so she heard him playing upon his harp. Text continues. Tess had heard those notes in the attic above her head. Dim, flattened, constrained by their confinement, they had never appealed to her as now, when they wandered in the still air with a stark quality like that of nudity. To speak absolutely, both instrument and the executor were poor, but the relative is all. And as she listened, Tess, like a fascinated bird, could not leave the spot. Far from leaving, she drew up towards the performer, keeping behind the hedge that he might not guess her presence. So Hardy gives a detailed description how they would come closer to each other. Hardy uses the backdrop, the natural scene, the natural scenery to create the backdrop of all this that matches what is going on, and this is the beauty of his writing style. Anyhow, the outskirt of the garden in which Tess found herself had been left uncultivated for some years and was now damp and rank with juicy grass which sent up mists of pollen at a touch, and with tall blooming weeds emitting offensive smells, weeds whose red and yellow and purple hues formed a polychrome as dazzling as that of cultivated flowers. She went stealthily as a cat through this profusion of growth, gathering cuckoo spittle on her skirts, cracking snails that were underfoot, staining her hands with thistle milk and slug slime, and rubbing off her, upon her naked arms sticky blights which those snow white on the apple tree trunks made madder stains on her skin. Thus she drew quite near to the Clare, still unobserved of him. As Hardy presents her passing through all that growth, moving towards from where the voice was coming, what we notice is that we can almost see Tess moving in front of our eyes, as is the picture as painted by Hardy, with minute details of the surroundings, using the colors, the images, using all the five senses that are attracted through the colors, through the sounds, through the smells. Anyhow, Tess was conscious of neither time nor space. The exaltation which she had described as being producible at will by gazing at a star came now without any determination of hers. She undulated upon the thin notes of the second hand harp, and their harmonies passed like breezes through her, bringing tears into her eyes. The floating pollen seemed to be his notes made visible, and the dampness of the garden, the weeping of the garden's sensibility. So the music and the mood of Tess and the background environment of the whole garden, they are so much in harmony. Though near nightfall the rank-smelling weed flowers glowed as if they would not close for intentness, and the waves of color mixed with the waves of sound. So everything seems to be so much in harmony that we can almost see all that. The light which still shone was derived mainly from a large hole in the western bank of cloud. It was like a piece of day left behind by accident, dusk having closed in elsewhere. He concluded his plaintive melody, a very simple performance demanding no great skill, and she waited, thinking another might be begun. But tired of playing, he had resolutely come round the fence and was rambling up behind her. Thus Tess, her cheeks on fire, moved away furtively, as if hardly moving at all. So now she's trying to escape. Angel, however, saw her light summer gown, and he spoke, his low tones reaching her, though he was some distance off. So what we notice is that Angel has noticed her presence there. The text continues. "What makes you draw off in this way, Tess?" said he. "Are you afraid?" "Oh no, sir, not of outdoor things, especially just now when the apple blossom is falling and everything is so green." Well, the part of the answer, well, oh no, sir, not of outdoor things, shows an aspect of the maturity of Tess, where she is not much afraid of the outer world now. The fears are the inner ones. "But you have your indoor fears, this is what he asks. "Well, yes, sir." This is the answer that she gives with some hesitation. "What of?" "I couldn't quite say." The milk turning sour? No. Life in general? Yes, sir. Ah, so have I very often. So have I very often. This hobble of being alive is rather serious, don't you think so? It is, now you put it that way. All the same, I shouldn't have expected a younger like you to see it so just yet. How is it you do? She maintained a hesitating silence. So Angel is surprised to see that such a young, such a beautiful girl would think of life in such a grim way. But she doesn't comment on that. Come, Tess, tell me in confidence, he urges her. She thought that he meant what were the aspects of things to her and replied shyly, the trees have inquisitive eyes, haven't they? That is, seem as if they had. And the river says, why do you trouble me with your looks? And you seem to see numbers of tomorrows just all in line, the first of them the biggest and clearest, the others getting smaller and smaller as they stand farther away. But they all seem very fierce and cruel, and as if they said, I'm coming, beware of me, beware of me. But you, sir, can raise up dreams with your music and drive all such horrid fancies away. So in one go, Tess gives her general comments on life, saying the fears, stating the fears, voicing the fears about the coming days, where each coming morning would say, beware of me, I am coming. Whereas at the same time, I would say simultaneously, she gives him the credit that with his music, he could raise up dreams and could drive all such horrid fancies away. He was surprised to find this young woman who thought, who though but a milkmaid, had just that touch of rarity about her which might make her the envied of her housemates, shaping such sad imaginings. So he is surprised at her gloomy view of life. Well, I think I have read quite enough part of this chapter and have given critical comments along with that reading. So just concluding on this particular chapter, the discussion points that I would just like to raise are two. Number one, we need to notice the romance between Angel Clare and Tess Durbeyfield that begins here. And number two, we need to compare Alec and Angel. One makes physical advances, the other only bestows small favors of lining up cause of her choice for her. The difference in nature is quite visible from the very beginning as we compare Angel with Alec. This brings us to chapter 20 of the novel, and this is the happiest phase of the life of Tess. As the months pass, Angel and Tess grow closer. They wake up early before the others and feel as if they are the only people on earth. Hardy has used the symbol of Eden. To them, the dairy seems to be, this is, I would say this is a typo, this is not N, this is M. So to them, the dairy seems to be an Eden where Angel is Adam and Tess is Eve. Tess is Angel's visionary essence of woman, and he playfully nicknames her Artemis and Demeter after the names of goddesses. Tess does not understand these nicknames and simply tells him to call her Tess. This giving her the names of goddesses is again symbolic because ironically he believes in her purity and virginity. Anyhow, they continue to enjoy the morning as the summer fog slowly lifts and birds fly in the misty air around. Here is some text from this chapter that I would like to share. Tess had never in her recent life been so happy as she was now. Possibly never would be so happy again. So this is the happiest phase of her life. She was, for one thing, physically and mentally suited among these new surroundings. The sapling, which had rooted down to a poisonous stratum on the spot of its sowing, had been transplanted to a deeper soil. Moreover, she and Claire also stood as yet on the debatable land between predilection and love, where no profundities have been reached, no reflections have set in, awkwardly inquiring, whither does this new current tend to carry me? What does it mean to my future? How does it stand towards my past? So I would say that they are not in love with each other, but they have just started that phase of their life that would bring them very close to each other. claiming to love each other. The text continues. Tess was the merest stray phenomenon to Angel Clare as yet, a rosy, warming apparition which had only just acquired the attribute of persistence in his consciousness. So he allowed his mind to be occupied with her, deeming his preoccupation to be no more than a philosopher's regard of an exceedingly novel, fresh and interesting specimen of womankind. They met continually, they couldn't help it. They met daily in that strange and solemn interval, the twilight of the morning, in the violet or pink dawn, for it was necessary to rise early, so very early here. Milking was done betimes, and before the milking came the skimming, which began at a little past 3. It usually fell to the lot of someone or other of them to wake the rest, the first being aroused by an alarm clock, and as Tess was the latest arrival, and they soon discovered that she could be depended upon not to sleep, though the alarm as others did. This task was thrust most frequently upon her, so she would wake up as the first person without any alarm, and she would wake other people up. No sooner had the hour of 3 struck and whizzed than she left her room and ran to the dairyman's door, then up the ladder to Angel's, calling him in a loud whisper, then woke her fellow maids as well. By the time that Tess was dressed, Clare was downstairs and out in the humid air. The remaining maids and the dairyman usually gave themselves another turn on the pillow and didn't appear till a quarter of an hour later. The grey half-tones of daybreak are not the grey half-tones of the day's close, though the degree of their shade may be the same. In the twilight of the morning, light seems active, darkness passive. In the twilight of evening, it is the darkness which is active and crescent, and the light which is the drowsy reverse. So actually Hardy paints the whole scene of where they meet in front of our eyes, comparing and contrasting the dawn and dusk scenes. Being so often, possibly not always by chance, the first 2 persons to get up at the dairy house, they seemed to themselves the first persons up of all the world. In these early days of her residence here, Tess did not skim, but went out of doors at once after rising, where he was generally awaiting her. The spectral, half-compounded, aqueous light which pervaded the open mead impressed them with a feeling of isolation, as if they were Adam and Eve. Again, it is very interesting for us to notice the use of these symbols of Adam and Eve and Eden as the garden where they are. At the end of the day, some serpent would come and would force them to leave this Eden. As this dim in-captive stage of the day is there, at this in-captive stage of the day, Tess seemed to Clare to exhibit a dignified largeness both of disposition and physique, an almost regnant power, possibly because he knew that at that preternatural time hardly any woman so well endowed in person as she was likely to be walking in the open air within the boundaries of his horizon, very few in all England. Fair women are usually asleep at midsummer dawns. This is a criticism of Hardy actually. She was close at hand and the rest were nowhere. So this is how their acquaintance started, that later on developed into a far closer relationship. When it comes to the discussion points with reference to this chapter, as I have earlier said, the symbols of Adam and Eve are important and significant. Hardy compares Angel and Tess to Adam and Eve in the mornings, thus foreshadowing a later fall from perfection. In the idealism and perfection that Tess finds at Talbot's dairy, that leads to this shaky foundation for her happiness, and we can apprehend as readers that soon there would be some problem. Angel Clare adores Tess as a representation of perfection. To Angel, Tess is a goddess, such as Artemis or Demeter, a symbol of perfection rather than a human being with faults and foibles. And it is Angel's lack of ability to see her as a human being with some faults and some follies This lack of perception on Angel's part would lead towards a lot of problems later on in the novel. It is also ironic that Angel's appreciation is based on his idea of her strength and her disposition, yet this perfection has greatest weakness at the back that he does not know yet. This brings us to chapter 21 of the novel. Worry and imperfection surrounds the air of the dairy in this chapter. There is worry about the butter which is not churning properly. Mrs. Crick jokes that this sort of thing happens only when someone on the farm falls in love. Mr. Crick tells a story about how a Jack Dollop impregnated a local girl whose mother came to the dairy to find him. Jack hid in the churn. The mother learned that he is there, and she started the churn with him inside until he agreed to marry the girl. Now, as everybody knows, there are two people who are in love, and the milkmaids often discuss Angel's interest in Tess. So somehow this story, both of them find related to them because they are the lovers there. Tess, however, doesn't want to marry, though, because she is still ashamed of her past. After some further churning, the butter begins to set and everyone is happy. However, what we notice about Tess is that she is depressed throughout the day. She is depressed by the thought that to her companions the dairyman's story had been a humorous one, for none seemed to see the sorrow of it. But since she herself had been through that kind of experience, she finds it a sad story and can relate herself to the story. When it comes to the critical points of discussion with reference to this chapter, I would say the attraction and love between Angel Clare and Tess Derbyfield, although not explicitly stated between these two characters, is quite obvious to the others at Talbot's dairy. So it's a kind of a known secret to everybody. Two important ideas related to this chapter that are embedded in terms of themes in the text are: number one, the theme of guilt, and number two, the theme of permanence of sin. It is the guilt of Tess that makes her think of relating herself to the story, and it is the permanence of sin, the idea of the permanence of sin. Once a sin committed, it never leaves a person, the sinner. The idea that you cannot get rid of your sin no matter whatsoever you do after that. This idea is presented, and that is why despite all the happiness around, we see again the shadows of fear and of guilt entering into the life of Tess, that foreshadow that the sin that is committed in the past, irrespective of whether she sinned or she was sinned against, it would be permanent and would have permanent marks on her life. With this, we come to chapter 22 of the novel, and we see that early in the morning when all wake up, they find Crick's disturbed. He's walking with a letter in his hand from a customer who complains that the butter he has bought from them had a twang or a sharp taste. Now Mr. Crick realizes that this taste must be the result of the cows eating from garlic weeds. It is very, very interesting for us to notice that once Hardy has chosen this rural dairy background as the backdrop of his novel, he very masterly has incorporated the everyday routine, the issues and the problems of dairy life into the happenings of the novel to give it a real life kind of feeling, and it also shows his knowledge of country life, of life at dairies, etc. Anyhow, everybody including Angel and the dairy maids go out to the pasture to search for those garlic weeds that have given that sharp taste to the sour taste to the butter. As Angel and Tess work closer, Tess takes the opportunity to mention the virtues of two of her close milkmaid friends, Iz and Retty. So two characters, Iz and Retty, who are the milkmaids there and who now have befriended with Tess. Tess thinks that they are more suitable persons for Angel, so she introduces them in terms of their virtues. She talks to him. about them. Angel agrees that they are nice women and capable dairy maids, but indicates that he has no romantic interest in them. From this day, Tess forces herself to take pains to avoid Angel. So again, it is her past, and it is her guilt about what has happened to her in the past that she starts avoiding Angel. Before we move forward, I would just like to share some opening text of this chapter that would give us an idea of what was happening around on the dairy. They came downstairs yawning next morning, but skimming and milking were proceeded with as usual, and they went indoors to breakfast. Dairyman Crick was discovered stamping about the house. He had received a letter in which a customer had complained that the butter had a twang. And begad so to have, said the dairyman, who held in his left hand a wooden slice on which a lump of butter was stuck. Yes, taste for yourself. Several of them gathered round him, and Mr. Clare tasted, Tess tasted, also the other indoor milkmaids, one or two of the milking men, and last of all Mrs. Crick, who came out from the waiting breakfast table. There certainly was a twang or a bitter taste in the butter. The dairyman, who had thrown himself into abstraction to better realize the taste and so divine the particular species of noxious weed to which it appertained, suddenly exclaimed, "Scarlet, and I thought there wasn't a blade left in that mead." So when he discovered that there was the taste of garlic in the butter, he asked all the dairy men and the maids to go into the garden and to pluck off those weeds. Now all of them, as they are working there, here I am just showing you some extract of the text that is about Angel and Tess as they are there. When she found him near her, her very tension at what she had heard the night before made her the first to speak. "Don't they look pretty?" she said. "Who? Ezihute and Retty?" Tess had moodily decided that either of these maidens would make a good farmer's wife, and that she ought to recommend them and obscure her own wretched charms. "Pretty? Well, yes, they are pretty girls, fresh-looking. I have often thought so. Though, poor dears, prettiness won't last long." "Oh no, unfortunately. They are excellent dairy women. Yes, though not better than you." So whatsoever she says in their favor, Angel accepts that, but tries to prove that she is still better than them. "They skim better than I." "Do they?" Claire remained observing them, not without their observing him. "She's colouring up," continued Tess heroically. "Who?" "Retty Prudle." "Oh, why is that?" "Because you are looking at her." Self-sacrificing as her mood might be, Tess could not well go further and cry, "Marry one of them if you really do want a dairy woman and not a lady, and don't think of marrying me." So she followed Dairyman Crick and had the mournful satisfaction of seeing that Claire remained behind. So she wants him to marry one of those girls. From this day she forced herself to take pains to avoid him, never allowing herself as formerly to remain long in his company, even if their juxtaposition were purely accidental. She gave the other three every chance. I would say a theme of self-sacrifice and theme of guilt simultaneously run through this text. Tess was woman enough to realize from their avowals to herself that Angel Clare had the honor of all the dairy maids in his keeping, and her perception of his care to avoid compromising the happiness of either in the least degree bred a tender respect in Tess for what she deemed, rightly or wrongly, the self-controlling sense of duty shown by him, a quality which she had never expected to find in one of the opposite sex, and in the absence of which more than one of the simple hearts who were his housemates might have gone weeping on her pilgrimage. And this is the point where actually the chapter comes to an end. When we look at this chapter critically, what we notice is that Tess begins to avoid any possible romantic engagement with Angel, and when he makes his feelings for her more explicit, she starts avoiding her. She rejects Angel's affection for her because she believes that he wants a simple girl as a wife and not a member of a noble family. What she thinks that she has a lineage link with the D'Urbervilles, so this is what Angel would not like. The reason of Tess's rejection of Angel is very ironic, however. For her shame stems from not the more lowly details of her history, that is what has happened to her in the past, but her association with a high-class family. And ironically, what she is afraid of is that she may be exposed as a noble lady, not that she may be exposed as an unchaste woman. This brings us to chapter 23 of the novel, and again we see some time lapse. 2 months after her arrival at the dairy on a Sunday, Tess and other milkmaids and milkers, they set to attend the Mellstock church. There has been a torrential downpour the day before, and the girls come across a long stretch of flooded road. While standing on the bank, the girls find Angel Clare coming towards them through the water. Angel asks the girl, avoiding Tess, whether they are going to church, and he offers to carry them through the flooded area. All of them, of course, agree to that. All the girls notice that Angel takes the longest with Tess, as he takes each of them one by one to the other side, and each of them realizes his interest that he takes in her. Tess begins to avoid Angel, but she notices from afar his grace and self-discipline in the company of the girls. Later on one night, Marion, Iz and Retty each confess to love Angel and to feeling love for Angel, and Tess feels guilty on this, since she too loves Angel but has already decided never to marry. She wonders if she is wrong to take so much of his time or not so. Anyhow, later that summer, Angel and Tess are milking cows, and Angel is overcome with his feeling for Tess. This is what we are told in chapter 24. He embraces her and she gives way to her feelings for a moment before trying to pull away. Angel tells Tess that he loves her and is surprised to hear the words come out of his mouth. No one has noticed their encounter, and the two return to their milking routine shaken. When it comes to a critical evaluation of this chapter, I would say what has been obvious yet never stated in the preceding chapter, it becomes explicit in this chapter. And Angel makes his first physical advance on Tess and professes his love for her. As Hardy ends this phase with the following words, we know as readers the dimensions of their relationship have changed. Here is the last part of the chapter. A veil had been whisked aside. The tact of each one's outlook was to have a new horizon thenceforward, for a short time or for a long. And with this, Hardy announces end of phase the third. Here are overall comments on phase 3. I would say that the beginning of this phase portrays the beginning of the happiest period of Tess's life, as I have discussed earlier. The narrator indicates that she had never been in her recent life so much happy as was now, and possibly would never be so happy again. Hardy presents a matching landscape that is beautiful, fragrant and healthier. Tess also complements it perfectly. Her nature and mood suit her surroundings. She is very happy. She is a simple rustic beauty that matches the beauty of the country paradise of the dairy, and the ripening weather of summer matches the blossoming romance between Tess and Angel. So the whole backdrop, the whole surroundings and the characters set in these surroundings all are in cheerful mood. We see Tess returning to normal life after all that happened to her in phase 1 and 2. We see her growing and achieving as a worker. We notice her as a more virtuous lover, and this perspective is reinforced by Hardy's symbols of Eden, Adam and Eve. So with this, what we notice is that Tess, when you see talks to Angel and says the answers she seeks are not to be found in books, it indicates that she wants to learn directly from the experiences of life. She is ready to learn and to experience the world again. She is ready to learn from her mistakes she has made, and she wants to grow. Again, we find a resemblance in Tess and Angel. Both of them, they have left their places to learn. Angel seeks to become independent from his family's current legacy of religion, and Tess wants to become independent of hers. Interestingly, the first half of the phase 3 also has given us some information about the life history of another important character in the novel, that is Angel, and in the light of all this information that Hardy has provided, it would be easier for us as readers to understand the relationship between Tess and Angel as it would develop through the upcoming parts of the novel. So far, when I look at the second half of this phase, I would say that overall plot of this phase is linear. The whole phase is constructed around what Hardy calls Tess's invincible instinct towards self-delight. And she enjoys a happy period at Talbot's dairy and her new romance with Angel Clare. In the second half of this phase, we also notice the irony of Angel's first impression of Tess, that she is virginal, is underplayed by Tess's self-sacrificing virtue when she tries to convince Angel in favor of her fellow dairymaids. Very interestingly, a new conflict arises in this phase between Tess's new love for Angel and her moral reservations about acting on that love, and we see her hesitating on this point. Hardy as a writer uses the simple technique of comparison and contrast to bring in a comparison and contrast between Angel and Alec, a comparison and contrast between Tess and the other dairymaids is made. She is compared and contrasted with the other dairymaids to give us a clear picture and to give a clear picture of her personality to Angel. Tess views herself as equal or subordinate to her friends Marin, Iz and Retty, but Angel sees her as perfect and above all others, which proves to be ironic. With this, I am just closing today's session. We come to the closure of today's session. We have completed phase 3 in this session. Here is a quick review of the session. In fact, phase 3, as it consists of chapters 16 to 24, we have covered all. We have looked at the text of these chapters, important events and happenings as they took place. We have also explored related themes. We have discussed the development of different characters, and we have critically analyzed the selected parts of the text. With this, we come to the end of today's session. In the next session, inshallah, we would cover the next phase of the life of Tess. Thank you very much. Allah.